A thief breaks into a luxury car without knowing it was designed as a deadly trap. The film opens with a depiction of a densely populated neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where almost every house is surrounded by tall iron fences, doors and windows are reinforced with thick metal bars. Surveillance cameras are installed on every corner, and warning signs about vicious dogs cover the walls to scare off potential thieves. All of this reflects how high the crime rate is in the area, especially theft and robbery, forcing residents to push their home security to extreme levels. Despite the excessive protection, the quiet and empty streets create an opportunity for an experienced thief named Ciro to act without fear. With swift and practiced movements, he forcibly breaks into an unattended 4x4 SUV and steals the car radio along with a pair of glasses. Instead of leaving immediately, his obnoxious nature shows itself, and he urinates on the back seat before trying to get out. Fate, however, has other plans, because just as he is about to leave, the car doors suddenly lock automatically, trapping Ciro inside. Panic takes over as he kicks the windows with all his strength, smashes them using tools from the car, and even tries to pry open the side door until the skin on his hands is torn and bleeding. When all of those efforts fail, he desperately pulls out a gun and fires at the glass, hoping it will crack or shatter. But instead, the bullet ricochets and strikes his own thigh. Wounded, he takes off his shirt and uses it as an emergency bandage to wrap his leg. He then tries to call his wife, Irina, but his bad luck continues when his phone runs out of battery. When a woman stops nearby to check her reflection in the car window, Ciro screams at the top of his lungs and even tries to honk the horn, yet all of it is useless because the vehicle is completely soundproof and the horn does not work. His suffering worsens as he realizes he has no food or water, while the air inside the car becomes suffocating and reeks of urine because of his own actions. As day turns into night, his body weakens and he eventually falls asleep in complete despair. The next morning, trying to calm himself down, he reinstalls the radio he had stolen and plays his favorite song, attempting to forget the nightmare he is trapped in. That brief moment of calm does not last because suddenly the car's audio system receives an incoming call. Confused, Ciro answers, and on the other end he hears the voice of an elderly man who introduces himself as Enrique, the owner of the car and a gynecologist around 60 years old who lives alone. Enrique explains that he has been robbed 28 times before and that Ciro makes the 29th. Years of trauma drove him to design this vehicle as a trap, equipped with extreme security technology. He knew Ciro was inside thanks to an alarm notification sent directly to his phone. The car is reinforced with bulletproof armor covering almost the entire body, fitted with extremely dark tinted windows, a suspension system that is locked so the vehicle does not react even when shaken, and complete soundproofing so that no screams from inside can ever be heard outside. The only part not protected by armor is the fuel tank, which at that moment is completely full. That is why no one around notices anything unusual, even when a woman briefly stops to look at her reflection in the car window and fails to see Ciro inside. Enrique also explains that he can control the entire vehicle remotely, including turning the air conditioning on and off, locking certain functions, and even detonating the car if he chooses to. In the middle of the conversation, he talks about his impoverished childhood and then asks Ciro what he would do if one day he caught his own child stealing. Exhausted and severely dehydrated, Ciro ignores the question and keeps begging for a sip of water. Feeling disrespected, Enrique immediately hangs up the call and in response activates the car's air conditioning at the lowest possible temperature for an extended period, causing Ciro to shiver violently from the cold. Shivering violently and with his wound growing more painful, Ciro finally removes the shirt he had been using as a bandage and puts it back on because the cold has become unbearable while he tears his jeans to wrap around his bleeding thigh. He also tries to block the air vents as best he can, hoping the freezing air will stop torturing his body. Not long after that, Enrique calls again and repeats the same question about what Ciro would do if one day he caught his own child stealing, this time promising a sip of water if the answer satisfies him. Cornered and desperate, Ciro replies that he would turn his child over to the police so he would learn his lesson. But instead of being pleased, Enrique is disappointed, arguing that cases like that should not need to involve the law. He then rambles on about his daughter who was once robbed and his grandchild who nearly suffered the same fate, as if trying to emphasize that the world has become far too cruel to be left unchecked. At this point, it becomes clear that Enrique is not only imprisoning Ciro, but also taking pleasure in a psychological game through questions that never truly need answers.
Tiene que darle todo el dinero guardado para estos casos. ¿Qué harías si sorprendes a tu hijo robando?
The situation grows even more ironic when a police officer arrives and issues a ticket to the car because its window tint is excessively dark and violates regulations. Ciro instinctively screams and shakes the vehicle, hoping to be noticed, but he quickly realizes it is pointless because the car is completely soundproof and the suspension does not react at all. Rain begins to fall, and Enrique calls once more, asking for Ciro's full name and identification number in exchange for water. With his thirst now unbearable, Ciro is forced to reveal all his personal information. Only then does Enrique inform him that there is a small amount of water in the rear windshield washer hose, and although the amount is minimal, it is just enough to keep Ciro from severe dehydration.
El agua, fíjate el sapito de atrás.
36.
The next morning, Ciro continues trying to break through the door using whatever tools he has left, until Enrique calls again and Ciro admits that his wound is starting to rot and his body feels feverish. Hearing this, Enrique instead turns on the car's heater, claiming it will help reduce the effects of the fever, and then launches into another long story about his life, which according to doctors will only last about 1 more year due to a malignant tumor, while once again recounting the robberies that shaped him into the cold man he has become. As hunger becomes unbearable and his mind begins to unravel, Ciro ends up eating torn pages from the car's manual, rearranging random items, sticking decals everywhere, scribbling on the seats, and at his lowest point, even drinking his own urine just to survive. Unexpectedly, another man, a fellow thief, attempts to break into the car, but his actions are quickly noticed by nearby residents and end with him being beaten before the police arrive and drag him away. Ironically, Ciro can only watch everything from behind the glass, fully aware that being trapped inside this car is slowly destroying him. Yet even if he managed to escape, his fate would likely still be prison. As the third night arrives, Ciro, fed up with Enrique's endless monologues, chooses to stop answering his calls altogether. Nearly broken by hunger and despair, he briefly considers eating a cricket that somehow finds its way into the car, but abandons the idea because that tiny creature feels like the only living being still keeping him company. The following morning, Enrique contacts Ciro again and tells him that there is a chocolate bar hidden near the rear brake. Hearing this, Ciro gropes around with the last of his strength and devours the chocolate without leaving a single bite. A small stroke of luck remains on his side, because Ciro's phone still uses a removable battery rather than a built-in one, so he desperately tries placing the battery under the scorching sunlight to recharge it slightly. With what little energy he has left, Ciro resumes his attempt to break through the middle section of the door, and this time he manages to create a small hole, but when he tries to call out to people outside, the opening is too narrow and his voice is far too weak to be heard. Not long after, Enrique calls again and casually explains that he has already met Ciro's wife and son, Irina and Lionel, and gave them $100,000 under the pretense that Ciro had won a lottery, while emphasizing that he did not harm his family in any way. Instead of feeling relieved, Ciro grows even more suspicious because everything Enrique says feels like nothing more than psychological manipulation, especially as Enrique continues to belittle him, attacking his dignity as a failed husband and father. Enrique even reveals that he has studied Ciro's criminal record, including several murder cases linked to his name, although Ciro insists that those incidents happened only because he was forced to act in self-defense. After leaving the battery under the sun all day, Ciro's phone finally turns on, showing barely 1% of power, and without hesitation he immediately tries to call Irina, but the call never connects and he only manages to leave a brief voice message before the phone dies again. When night falls, Ciro opens the small hole in the door and releases the cricket that has kept him company all this time. In a dazed and hopeless state, he absent-mindedly presses the starter button, and to his surprise, the car engine actually comes to life. However, because the gear is locked in reverse, the car speeds backward uncontrollably until it crashes into a utility pole, shattering the rear window and giving Ciro a chance to escape.
Blanca de mierda.
With his body trembling and his throat parched, he runs to the nearest store, grabs water and 2 burgers, and eats them frantically without caring about the people around him, frightening the female cashier who immediately calls for security. When the guard approaches, Ciro instinctively pulls out his gun and shoots him, but in an instant, everything collapses as he wakes up back inside the car, realizing that his brief freedom was nothing more than a dream. Not long after that, Enrique calls again, and in total despair, Ciro decides to end his suffering by pointing the gun at himself, but the weapon jams and fails to fire.
Que el domingo es un día de mierda para todo.
At that very moment, the car's headlights suddenly turn on, and from within the blinding light, Enrique appears, standing right in front of the vehicle, revealing himself to Ciro for the first time as Ciro realizes he truly has no way out. Realizing that Ciro is already on the brink of death, Enrique casually opens the door and gets into the car. He gives Ciro a cigarette, a small piece of chocolate, and begins cleaning the wound on his thigh in a rough and careless manner, showing no empathy at all despite being a doctor.
Tu último deseo.
Para mi traje.
Ya no quedaré nada. Deja de gritar.
When Enrique's phone rings with a call from one of his patients, his attention slips for a moment, and Ciro seizes that opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Enrique before stumbling out of the car. This time, he truly manages to escape. Weak and barely standing, he screams for help, rings the doorbells of nearby houses, and even fires several shots into the air, desperately hoping someone will come to his aid. That hope quickly collapses when it turns out Enrique is still alive, as the bullet only grazed his cheek. Enraged and injured, Enrique immediately drags Ciro back into the car at gunpoint, and the scene is accidentally witnessed by a female police officer who is patrolling the area. The situation escalates into a prolonged standoff lasting nearly 2 hours. With Enrique continuing to hold Ciro hostage while residents gather, the crowd grows larger, and the media begins covering the incident live. Public opinion becomes divided, with some believing Ciro deserves everything that happens to him because he is a thief and a criminal, while others feel Enrique has crossed the line of basic humanity. As the situation grows more complex, the police eventually call in Julio, a senior negotiator, to try to defuse the tension. During the confrontation, Enrique compares criminals to dog feces left on the streets, while the dog owners represent law enforcement that allows the filth to remain without cleaning it up. According to Enrique, criminals are allowed to roam free despite being clearly guilty, which is why he believes he must take matters into his own hands to clean up the mess, since justice is never truly enforced. Strangely enough, many people in the crowd nod in agreement, having been victims of robbery themselves and feeling that the legal system is far too lenient. Julio slowly approaches while speaking in a calm tone, then psychologically challenges Enrique by saying that if he shoots Ciro now, Enrique's child will forever be remembered as the child of a murderer. Those words leave Enrique frozen and mentally shaken until he finally lowers his weapon and lets Ciro go.
Mire, les voy a contar una historia. Unos días más tarde sale de su casa para ir a estudiar lo fijo, pero no le dio importancia.
However, instead of surrendering, Enrique returns to his car. Aware that he does not have much time left to live due to his terminal illness, that his reputation is completely destroyed, and that all of his actions are now under public scrutiny, Enrique chooses to end everything on his own terms by detonating the car.
realmente conmocionante.
The case goes viral, sparking widespread debate about weak security and the justice system in Argentina. But as with many tragedies before it, public outrage slowly fades away. And the greatest irony emerges when it becomes clear that despite Ciro's long list of criminal records, there is a strong chance he will not spend much time behind bars, and the story comes to an end.